Long before philosophy was written into books, it lived in conversations, in questions that challenged certainty, and forced people to confront their own thinking. Across history, a handful of minds reshaped how humanity understands truth, knowledge, morality, and existence itself. These were not just thinkers, they were architects of perspective, and few were more influential than Socrates. Unlike many philosophers remembered for their writings, Socrates left none behind. His ideas survived through the accounts of students and observers, echoing through dialogues that would define the foundation of Western thought. Walking the streets of ancient Athens, he engaged citizens in relentless questioning, probing beliefs, exposing contradictions, and dismantling assumptions that had long gone unchallenged. This method, now known as the Socratic approach, did not seek to provide answers as much as it sought clarity. By guiding others to examine their own reasoning, Socrates transformed philosophy from abstract speculation into an active pursuit of understanding. Knowledge was not something inherited, it was something earned through inquiry, but challenging accepted ideas came at a cost. His influence unsettled authorities and disrupted social norms. Accused of corrupting the youth and undermining tradition, he was brought to trial. Offered the chance to abandon his teachings, he refused. Instead, he accepted the sentence imposed upon him, death by hemlock, choosing principle over survival. His life demonstrated that philosophy was not merely theory, it was conviction in action. And though Socrates himself never wrote a single line, his questions would ignite a lineage of thinkers who expanded and reshaped his ideas, beginning with one of his most famous students. Among the students shaped by Socrates' relentless questioning, none would carry his legacy further than Plato. If Socrates challenged minds in the streets, Plato built the structure that preserved those ideas for centuries. Through written dialogues, he transformed philosophy into something enduring, something that could travel beyond a single lifetime. But Plato did more than record his teacher's thoughts. He expanded them. At the heart of his philosophy was a radical claim. The world we see is not the ultimate reality. According to Plato's theory of forms, everything in the physical world is merely an imperfect reflection of a higher, abstract realm of perfect ideals. Justice, beauty, equality, these were not just human concepts. They were eternal forms existing beyond material experience. To explain this, Plato offered one of the most enduring metaphors in philosophical history, the allegory of the cave. In it, prisoners chained inside a cave mistake shadows on a wall for reality. Only when one escapes and sees the outside world does he realize how limited his perception had been. For Plato, philosophy was that escape, a journey from illusion to understanding. His influence extended beyond theory. He founded the Academy in Athens, one of the earliest institutions of higher learning in the Western world. There, philosophy became structured inquiry, shaping generations of thinkers. Plato's ideas would dominate intellectual life for centuries. His vision of reality, politics, and knowledge influenced theology, science, and governance long after ancient Greece had faded. And among the students who walked through the Academy's halls was another thinker, one who would challenge even Plato himself and redefine philosophy once again. Among the students shaped within Plato's academy, one would go on to challenge his teacher's vision and reshape philosophy with a more grounded approach. Aristotle, where Plato looked beyond the physical world for truth, Aristotle turned his attention toward it. He believed understanding came not from escaping reality, but from studying it carefully. Observation, classification, and logic became the tools through which knowledge could be built. His influence stretched across disciplines. Aristotle examined biology, ethics, politics, metaphysics, rhetoric, and physics, treating each as part of a unified pursuit of understanding. He catalogued living organisms, analyzed systems of governance, and developed formal logic, establishing frameworks that shaped intellectual inquiry for centuries. Central to his thinking was the idea of causality. At that understanding, something requires knowing why it exists, how it functions, and what purpose it serves. This systematic approach helped transform philosophy from speculative dialogue into structured investigation. In ethics, he introduced the concept of the golden mean, the idea that virtue lies between extremes. Courage, for example, exists between recklessness and cowardice. For Aristotle, a flourishing life was achieved through balance, reason, and cultivated character rather than abstract idealism. His teachings reached beyond academia. As tutor to a future ruler, Alexander the Great, Aristotle's influence indirectly touched geopolitics and cultural expansion across vast territories. By grounding thought in experience and method, Aristotle bridged philosophy and science, shaping intellectual tradition for millennia. Yet centuries later, philosophy would shift again, moving away from ancient foundations toward questions of reason, morality, and the limits of human understanding itself. By the 18th century, philosophy faced a crisis. Rationalists argued that knowledge came from reason alone. Empiricists insisted it came from experience. The debate seemed irreconcilable until Immanuel Kant proposed a solution that would redefine the limits of human understanding. Kant suggested that knowledge does not arise purely from reason, nor purely from experience, but from the interaction between the two. According to him, the human mind is not a passive receiver of information. It actively shapes reality through structures like space, time, and causality. In his groundbreaking work, Critique of Pure Reason, Kant argued that we never perceive the world as it is in itself. Instead, we perceive it through the lens of our cognitive framework. Reality, as experienced, is partly constructed by the mind, but his influence extended beyond epistemology. In ethics, Kant introduced one of the most influential moral principles in history, the categorical imperative. Rather than grounding morality in consequences or emotion, he argued that actions should be guided by universal principles. One should act only according to rules that could be consistently applied to everyone. This shifted morality away from outcome-based thinking and toward duty and intention. For Kant, ethical behavior was not about achieving the best result, it was about acting from principle. His work reshaped debates on freedom, responsibility, autonomy, and human dignity. Modern discussions of human rights, law, and moral philosophy continue to reflect his framework. With Kant, philosophy became a systematic examination of the boundaries of reason itself. Yet not everyone accepted this structured, duty-bound vision of morality and truth. In the 19th century, a thinker would emerge who challenged not only systems of knowledge, but the foundations of morality, religion, and culture. In the 19th century, philosophy took a turn toward confrontation, not with the limits of knowledge, but with the foundations of belief itself. Few voices embodied that shift more dramatically than Friedrich Nietzsche. Where earlier philosophers sought systems, structure, or universal principles, Nietzsche questioned whether those foundations were stable at all. He challenged religion, morality, and cultural assumptions, arguing that many accepted truths were not absolute, but constructed. One of his most famous declarations, that God is dead, was not a literal claim, but a cultural diagnosis. Nietzsche believed that traditional sources of meaning were losing influence in modern society, leaving a vacuum that humanity had yet to confront. Without inherited frameworks, individuals faced the responsibility of creating their own values. From this emerged the idea of the Übermensch, not a superior being in a simplistic sense, but a symbol of self-overcoming, someone capable of shaping purpose and identity through will, creativity, and personal responsibility rather than conformity. Nietzsche's writing style was provocative, poetic, and confrontational. He rejected detached academic language, instead aiming to unsettle and awaken his readers. His influence would ripple through existentialism, psychology, literature, and cultural criticism, shaping thinkers and artists long after his lifetime. If Socrates began philosophy with questions, and Kant defined its boundaries, Nietzsche forced it to face uncertainty and possibility without guarantees. Third, across centuries, philosophy has not been a single conversation, but an evolving dialogue about knowledge, reality, morality, and meaning. From the questioning streets of Athens with Socrates to structured ideas of Plato, the empirical reasoning of Aristotle, the critical frameworks of Immanuel Kant, and the cultural challenges posed by Friedrich Nietzsche, each reshaped how humanity understands itself and the world it inhabits. Their ideas endure, not because they provided final answers, but because they expanded the scope of the questions we continue to ask.